and welcome to the Back to Work series, Unfolding the Role of HR During and Post COVID-19, presented to you by HR Catalogue. In today's episode, we will be interacting about various challenges in bringing people back to work in the infrastructure industry. With over 25 years of experience in human capital management, our guest for today is an HR professional who has served in leading positions as strategic human resource business partner across industries like automobile, healthcare, wellness, telecom, pharma, infrastructure, etc. He is an HR specialist known for improving business growth through the HR function, building organizational capabilities, bringing in people's innovative processes, and instilling the best employer culture. I am very delighted today to bring to you Mr. Uttam Ghosh, Deputy CHRO and Senior Vice President, Global Operations at Feedback Infrastructures Limited, the man behind the talent management of 9,000 plus employees in a well-known design consulting project management company in the infrastructure industry. So let's interact with him and find out how has the journey been so far during the COVID crisis for them, and also let's understand how does the future of work look like to them. We are very pleased to welcome on our episode of Back to Work series today, Mr. Uttam Ghosh, Senior Vice President and Deputy CHRO, Feedback Infrastructures, and that too for the global operations. A very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you, Richa. Thank you so much for inviting me, having me here. I'm really delighted to speak to you. I hope our conversation will make a lot of meaning for each other. Thank you.
For sure, sir. Going to the question straight, right. How do you think from the HR perspective, this entire crisis situation affected the infrastructure industry?
Right, Richard. I think that's an interesting question at the very outset. I think the pandemic has been a big surprise for a lot of, most of us, because the world wasn't prepared for this. Okay, we never knew early February or January that it's going to attack us with such severity, right? And you will realize that we were hearing news in China and some places that's happening, and we were actually comfortable in our own space that it won't hit us that big, right? And possibly we'll be safeguarded, and maybe the virus, like the earlier viruses, may not reach geographies so fast. But come February end and March, we realized that there's a panic setting in. And then the panic started. Very quickly we realized that, okay, now I think it's going to different countries, and every time all of us were tracking the global scenario, and we saw that, the virus was reaching Europe, some countries, the virus was reaching, America. So clearly, it was very clearly known to us that by February, that India will not be left out from this virus. And by early March, we saw cases also, and the airlines was, canceling their flights and all. Some flights were still working. A lot of people are coming from outside. So early March, when things happened, one function which actually got clearly on toes was human resources, right? Because typically, if you know that human resources will take care of employees scattered across the globe. And from my organization's perspective, we are operating in so many countries, and employees are working in various places. And in India, we are spread across all 29 states with people across 200 locations. And suddenly, this thing, when it hits you so quickly, you get a little numb also, right? What to do, right? And the other functions look up to you. It's a very natural, response from other functions, including businesses, that tell me what to be done. I don't think, we were prepared, to respond that fast, not the world. But the good thing is that the government started putting advisories, And you would remember early, March, first week, we started getting those advisories on travel and all. And we had to spring to our toes and then suddenly, get our gears on and talk to people, and get into huddle and talk to each other, then what is to be done. None of us knew much. And today also, if you see, even after, 10 months or 8 months, 9 months, you see experts telling us that we still don't know much about it, right? So it was black swan, suddenly, springing issue springing up, which is so globally scattered, and it hits you with the equal force, and it wants you to act in the same manner, unequivocally similar in all places. So for HR function, it was suddenly okay. So we have to do something. So to your question, it was interesting that how do you deal with it? And in infra, because you're in a scattered space where your employees are working far, spread, wide, thin, countries. You have 4 people in Enugu, Port Harcourt in Nigeria, for you in Kenya, for you in other countries, adjoining countries, and then within India. You suddenly, if you even want to advise something, you have to be extremely cautious. So it required a lot of thinking. What is the right thing to be done? Yes, from a HR angle, it was a very, very big surprise for all of us, and we knew little, and we had to really act fast. And the only option, we had to gather more and more information, collaborate, synergize, talk to each other, and find a common platform where everybody agrees.
Not just scattered in different locations, but in different roles. While some you might expect on the site, you are expecting few at office, a few of them at in the marketing and the logistics. So they're on the run.
Yes, it was very interesting. Yeah, you bring a very interesting dimension. So we had worked on a protocol, so to say, or advisory much before the government decided for a lockdown. So what we started working, we created an advisory that look, there'll be no travel, complete restriction on travel. Okay, no visitors, less visitors. We'll respond on all digital platform in terms of meetings. We will start maintaining the social distancing, or so to say, the physical distancing, and the protocols of checking and entry, roster also, that not everybody is supposed to come. We started work from home 2 weeks prior the government declaring lockdown. A lot of businesses had design work, right? And the designers, they need special apparatus and devices, computers, applications. So how can they work from home? It's not an easy laptop which you take home, and then easily log in from and plug and play. But then for them, what to do? So we actually did something good. So why can't we shift the desktops to the residences? So we took a call, and the call was appreciated. HRs came in, and all were in tandem. Okay, let's even if it is a logistical nightmare or cost, let's put the computers at home with the printers, so that people actually can, and we'll see how it works. So see, a lot of things in the COVID, a lot of people did. Some things we knew that it will happen. Some things many people did not know whether it will happen or not. And we only realized with progression of time that it works. It was 2 weeks prior the government's lockdown, which was around 20th March, if you remember. And we did it because we thought, let's practice this, because you never know what will happen. This will become a mode of operation going ahead. The COVID actually forced you to come out with creative, out-of-box thinking, and take some lateral decisions which were not appreciated or not giving comfort to people initially. It is very obvious. People will say, okay, I can't see my people. The project manager will say, okay, I have been giving instructions in physical presence. How can I see the designs and all? How can the project execution team is? So typically what happens, organizations work together, right? In a physical space. So they're so used, and the mental block or to the conditioned mind doesn't allow you quickly to adapt to something this big. And we still are continuing. So every day is still a learning process. I don't think we have overcome the entire challenge. And the pandemic, or the COVID-19 as a virus, it is changing form and shape. It is, it is not allowing you to, settle down quietly. After the lockdown by the government, it was chaotic because the government put restrictions on travel very soon. So we had massive number of people who were actually en route in transit or traveling, because there are a lot of people from one state working in other state, families behind. So suddenly the whole thing was that, okay, so we'll have to get people to their homes. And we never realized that we have to get so many people, within the country and from outside to inside. So evacuation became a big concern, right? So quickly, the first thing was, let's look and let's create a WhatsApp platform, which is, comprising of all task force, which will be online 24/7. Everybody has to respond. And that was a kind of, that was kind of control room, very small tool. It was immensely helpful because we would brief everybody what's happening. And we'll say, okay, so your people from Botswana are coming. Okay, what is the plan? What help you require? Okay, some people are actually stuck at the airport. What help they require? Okay, the taxis are not there. The cabs are not there. Somebody has to go to Mathura. Somebody has to go to Bihar. You're in a fix. You have people in advisory who are sitting at home. You have people like us who are supervisionary roles, or, you can do work from home. You have people on the move. You have people in the plaza operations. You have people who are in the railway yards working with RVNL projects. You have people working with international clients. So first and foremost thing was to really not allow the panic to set in.
Yes.
Do enough communication with each other, the brass tacks, team which was dealing with the brass tacks and communicating with people across the globe. So if somebody is stuck in Nigeria or Kenya, console them that, look, don't worry, we're there. So we will bring you back safely. And this bringing back thing initially happened in a spurt, then stopped completely. Yeah. So you had a next tranche of people coming in after June, July. Then every state had their own rules. Somebody was held up in Delhi. Somebody held in Mumbai. All international airports they had a advisory that you have to get into a quarantine zone. So initially that quarantine thing was panicky because everybody could not land up to their homes immediately. So there was a transit period. So you had to tell them, don't worry, we are there. We'll ensure that you reach home. Some were lucky. It was all kind of, chaos. And amidst the chaos, you're trying to make, some meaning. How do you really, work? So it's interesting, right, and very challenging.
So one thing that you mentioned that the immediate problem to be solved was getting people back to their homes, and also ensuring that the panic situation is not like a big balloon that takes over the minds of the people. So the first thing that you mentioned, that you created WhatsApp group for all the task force, so that you can communicate on probably a very, very frequent basis.
Yeah.
So apart from that, what was that thing? So did you build up a team just to ensure that there was enough communication in each and every part of every country where your people are working? Yeah. So did you have a team built?
No, the structure we have is that every business entities have their own HRs, right? And I sit at corporate office, managing the entire corporate HR function. And I integrate well with all policy formulation, deployment, communication, enforcement, and governance. That's the model we use. So the HR teams had to come together, and we had to get the top management completely in loop. Look, this is a huge health issue. So we took a lot of, centralized, the power was centralized to an extent to help, explain people, look, let one power center or let one center of authority deal with the situation. Rather everybody doing their own thing, because then otherwise what happens, you have too many people doing their own thing, and your unity of command actually fails. Such a crisis requires you to be unified, and hence we got that. But this WhatsApp group was a very, very very, very compact team of people who actually act on the ground, who can disseminate information, who can take calls, who can help people evacuate, who can get people to their next destination, who can deal with any surprises. Right. So that team was because if you have too big a team, then there's another problem.
So what are the other immediate challenges that we as an organization faced?
In many businesses of our group, Essential Services Act obviously applied. That means, we could not discontinue the work. We could not stop the work. And these but the businesses which are happening in open spaces. For example, the plaza operations, toll plaza operations, or the road, highways, road construction design related work, or the railways related work, where people are little, or the factories where we are actually managing power plants, right? And then power is again a commodity which is comes under essential services. Power distribution again. So you can't run a distribution without people, because people have to be on the field. So it was, we again had a challenge that, okay, so people have to work. We faced a lot of challenges from employees in the beginning, because there was early panic, and people actually, the first 2-3 weeks, people rushed to their homes. Now what happens, you have all kind of people. You have people who are in cities working, or locations working. They're coming from 150 kilometers far, 50 kilometers far, other state. They may not be in own homes. They might be in a rented accommodation, or they might be staying alone. So being a very, very young population and the kind of business we are into, and there are massive number of blue collar employees, that's where the insecurities were very high. And ironically, they are the people who work on the field. So for example, a surveyor has to be on the field. Okay. A billing person has to be on the field. He has to meet customers. She has to meet customers. So similarly, if you have to work on the railway yard, you have to work. You can't make it work from home for everybody. When we have, 90% of the projects which cannot be from home at all. So that challenge was big, because people rushed to their homes. And then suddenly we found that we were actually working with very limited workforce who actually remained in the city and the towns or the project locations. Otherwise, there was nobody. So making people turn up in such locations was a big challenge. So we actually laid down very detailed guidelines on office resumption. What are the guidelines once your work starts, resumes, whether it's a field, whether it's an office, whether it's a factory. So we quickly got it, the content was created. Content was easy, lucid, simple to understand, focused around SMS, which is, sanitization, hygiene, and social distancing. We put very, very, clear guidelines in terms of if office opens, whenever office opens, what are the protocol, what are the guidelines everybody has to follow. The business people, who can be called, how they can be called, what is the spacing we'll create in the workstations. So we quickly did those earmarking, and we ensured that the spaces are blocked, the urinals or the restrooms or the pantry, all. So we almost conceived that, okay, when the office opens, this is how it will operate. And what we did, we converted that SOP or guideline, whatever you might like to say, into an employee handbook also. Creating a handbook for all kind of people who have different proficiency level of understanding. And hence you need to be simple, lucid with, photographs, with pictures, because pictures speak more than words. And then it was almost a 75 page document. So that the guidelines and the documents were quickly shared with everybody across the globe. And we said, look, whenever you are open, this is how it will open. And even wherever the projects are working, you start implementing this in process. Employees got trained. We said within a week, every employee has to get training on this employee handbook. What is that we're talking about? Now, it is not just giving the handbook and saying, okay, pad lena, you read it. Nobody reads. 75 slides is too huge. So we converted that into PPT. We deployed down to the HR guys. I myself trained all HR guys what to talk about. And then we tracked that every HR does it. And we took we took numbers that how many people have covered. So we covered quickly in 7 to 10 days, all 5,000 on rolls and plus, other people. But what about client offices? What about offices where, we are operating out of the client location? Because client themselves were also working on this, right? So nobody was quiet. So we had to say, okay, fine. So use the client and come up with your set of guidelines, which is applicable. So for example, my guidelines in Gurgaon office, which is in a very, very flashy place, will not work for, some Mehsana or some, Gumla in Bihar or, in some place, Raipur or some place in Kerala, Telasuri. So it will not work, right? The location is different. The office is different. So you had to adapt to the local realities. You have to design your own protocols, keeping the broad framework. The broad framework is across same, at home, outside, one is talking about personal hygiene. You have to be extremely cautious about office hygiene. You have to be cautious about masks. Without masks, you'll not be allowed. And you also will have to maintain some social distancing. No pantry stuff, no food, at the premise. You're not supposed to not supposed to buy food from outside. So those protocols, basic, simple things were there. And we also put some, additional things on anxiety, how to address anxiety, stress, and all. We also said, look, it is time that when resumption happens, we will not allow people unless they self-declare. So the Arogya Setu was coming that time, almost before that, we actually introduced a self-declaration. That self-declaration had very simple 5-6 questions. And it had to be done, written. We linked that with attendance. So unless you actually fill up that form, you can't punch in your attendance. So yeah, it was sense of little, botheration for a lot of people that I can't punch in immediately. I have to just first feed those 5 questions, those simple questions that do you have any concerns with respect to health? Do you have, did you go to any containment zone in last 7 days? Have you come in contact with a COVID patient? Yes, no. Okay. How did you come to office? And Arogya Setu, have you downloaded things like that? And so that had a score, potential risk score. So we had put a logic there. And then we digitized it. And in the offices where we knew that people might come and they may not have a digital EA, we put a hard copies. So everybody entering the office, if at all for a critical urgency, exigency, they have to fill up. And online you have to just do it, and then only you can do your attendance. HR guys were trained that, look, I know it's difficult. You can't track 5,000 employees or so many employees, their reports. But look at those high potential risk scores. So wherever a score was decided that this score, anything beyond this, you should check. We supported that with some analytics so that people actually can focus on critical areas. At every step, we wanted to address that psychological distress also, because it was happening. And then people were also listening to news and hearing other organizations laying off. Salary cuts were happening. So it was all happening. And then you had to keep your flock together for the businesses you operate. Other thing which we started very early was that we started talking to every employee. And that was tough. Because that meant almost 30 people in HR talking to everybody on a regular. Initially, for almost 4 months, we were talking to every employee just to find out, everything fine now? Do you have any distress, anything which concerns you? Is everything fine in your family? Do you need any help? That reporting I was doing to my seniors or higher ups of the board on a daily basis. That continued till July. After that, when things little settle down, then employees themselves start saying, "Oh, good, you ask me every day, very good. But you can increase the frequency. Now you can actually ask me twice a week." That's fine. So, and they all appreciate it. So even the even seniors, chairman, getting a call from HR, "Are you fine?" So that was something which was very time consuming. I can tell you that it consumed maximum time of HR, and it is difficult to get people on call. If you're not getting people on call, then do a WhatsApp, and then we start reporting how many people are not feeling well today. But thankfully, we didn't have any mortality risks or any casualty, and people were ensured that they get the right treatment, whether at home, if they need any company's help, we will help them out wherever they are. And any case which erupts in any office, we have a very clear protocol that all contact tracing would be done. Anybody who was working with the person for last 1 week would be home quarantined, and the employee will be obviously for 14 days. It was 14 days quarantine, and the entire space will be sanitized, completely, deeply sanitized to resume. So those are the few things which happened in tandem. So from the angle of health and overall wellness or well-being of employees, organizations have to rethink completely. I personally feel that organizations have to now create a separate bucket or separate provision for employee wellness, much different from what they have done so far. So what companies have been doing so far is more of, obviously, statutory requirements is one, but other than that, you have mediclaims, hospitalization, and other support. You have to have a provision going ahead to meet such a catastrophe with a lot more alacrity, lot more planning, lot more sensitivity, so that we don't go helter skelter when it happens. And if you ask me, I'm not sure, and I'm sure nobody is sure that we will not be attacked with a new virus next time. It might happen. Now, how do we deal with it? So obviously, you have to have your policies across this wellness part much more robust, much more holistic, and much more all comprehensive, right? How do we really keep the families in mind when we're talking employees? Now, so far we had the challenge of looking at the physical health of the employees and maybe mental health also. A lot of companies have done a lot of work there in terms of counseling, coaching, or providing providing medical expertise, or getting doctors on line and all. But the family is a very important part now. So family, how do you really address the issues of wellness and your the concerns or insecurities or psychosis or fear of families? That's very important. So we have to really address that through policies first. So maybe you have to create facilities where you didn't have, where facilities like, how do you really quarantine people if there's any, in the office space? Or how do you, so if medical rooms are not there, you have to have staff. Typically what happens in offices, you won't find medical rooms. I would think that, going ahead, all offices would have a separate medical room or restroom where such things are cases of, any infection or anything where people are distressed should be, managed properly. More liaising with hospitals or, all support, medical support teams or, clinics will have to be done on a very, very war footing scale, so that on such an occasion, you are able to respond in time and effectively. Your measures with respect to health will go drastically different. I think masks will become relevant for a long, long time to come. Secondly, your personal hygiene is going to be important. Your office hygiene also has now taken a different shape. Now, if you check with employers, they will tell you that earlier the cleaning thinking was different. Even the cleaning, stuff which was being used has undergone change.
When majority of people in the country, they're sitting home, not working, and everybody's insecure about the safety of their lives. What is that thing that helps them come back to the organization or to their jobs? One could be their earning their livelihood could be one. Obviously that wouldn't be the immediate attraction, but after a few days they start realizing that this is not going to go, but we need to earn because we need to eat, right? So one attraction could be their livelihood. But apart from that, what in the organization worked in bringing them back to work?
I would be honest to tell you that, look, while our project managers and the managers at the forefront did play a very important role, because unless they assure the end employee, just HR cannot help. What was important is to tell them that, look, we have already started working and your colleagues are coming. So a lot of times the colleagues themselves also, remove that, that fear in mind, or they allay the doubts of people that look. In many places we operated with, having our own ACO arrangements. So we arranged accommodation for people to stay in that place, rather come and go every day. That was very helpful. So in some places it worked. In some places we offered vehicles. There were a lot of people who still did not want to come, were mainly from other states. Or, it required sensitivity. In one way, you might like to reject that, okay, they have gone to the villages, they don't want to come, or they have gone to the native, they don't want to come, they're far. But we also realized that, there was interstate transportation was not allowed. How would they come? They can't come by any flight. Flights were not there, trains were not there. So for some cases, yes, we also, got our vehicles to their place. But thankfully, yes, with time, we saw that people are coming in. It helps by reassuring again and again.
That you had to manage with 30% or even less, number of employees.
Right.
So then with this limited employees, or rather quoting it as limited skilled employees, at times it might so happen that you need X skill, but you don't have that X skill employee, you have the Y skill employee available, right, on the job. So how did you manage that limited skills on the job?
In many places, to be honest, we had people working on overtime. Because that's one way to minimize the risk, or one way to manage the shortfall of manpower, right? And I'll be honest, in many places where people did not turn up, we had to hire quickly. So you'll be surprised that hiring was happening and people were joining. So all this time, it's not that people were so scared that they did not care for jobs at all. There's some people who had the comfort to decide, or who had this insecurity in their mind to decide to stay back. But when you know that that site has a challenge and limited manpower is affecting the business or the deliverables, you ended up creating a bench also parallelly. Typically what happens, we realize that, okay, the people who are from local, within the 5 kilometers, they will still like to work. So the fear is palpable or higher in the minds of people who are coming from other states or other far off places. You would be hearing nowadays what the buzz is about gig workforce. So you coined a different term for freelancers, or people who are on a variable work nature, right? So gig workforce, gig economy puts the whole thing in a much more scalable manner. I mean, 25 years, 26 years I've been working. Every company we had a contract pool. We had third-party pool. We had people who would come on varying work modes, maybe twice a week, partial, not full-time employees or part-time employees. And that would suffice some of your, needs of skill, and also needs of, availability, and also not having a continuous cost center around such people. Such workforce earlier, or maybe hitherto, was mainly in blue-collar jobs, manufacturing jobs, factory jobs. You will see a huge number of gig workforce coming into play in the services sector also. Companies have to really orient themselves. HR has to orient to this change with the right policy. How do I get gig workforce? Easier said than done, because there'll be internal biases. So you have to dismantle all your earlier beliefs. Some of them will change slowly, some of them, but sooner or later, it will change. The organizations have to lean towards this. There's no other option. And I think it will help organizations in long term. You will get a better resource, more qualified resource, maybe for a shorter time, much better than what you have, much better than people you're retaining or, hooked onto. Now that has two sides of the story. One is the good side, the organization, okay, there's a financial benefit, there's a dividend of doing this. Let's do it. But then the other side is that your own permanent workforce will feel obviously threatened. How do you manage this mix? Your policies have to change. How do you manage governance? How do you manage compliance? How do you manage risks? Which such gig workforce risks are inevitable. How do you manage IPR? How do you manage intellectual property? Your own classified information, because such gig workforce will be working with many companies at the same time. So the duality of employment or dual employment, which was a big no-no so far, is not going to be a big no-no. It will be an accepted norm.
You need to manage policies around that.
Yeah.
How do we hire these kind of workforce, and what kind of governance and compliance should be in place?
See, and anyway, I've heard people talking about this area because the doubts will start from the business leaders. Okay, the doubts will start from the client's angle. Hey, I don't know this guy. This guy was there. He's vanished today. So what happened? The doubts will happen from your own team leaders. How do I manage? Hey, the guy has given me this time. You have told me that the person will work only for 2 days with you, 2 days a week. I know the work, but he knows that the volume of work is 2 days only. So get the thing done. So there are industries who work with gig workforce 100%. Entertainment industry, for example, right? They work with gig workforce 100%. Uh, Media, yes, the protocols, the guidance, guidelines have to be stricter. With digital, platforms, obviously, data theft or data secrecy or such risks will only increase. But then, when a problem comes, it also it also forces people to come with solutions. To my mind, the gig workforce or the concerns on governance or compliance or essentially data theft or intellectual property right, those issues are coming because we are not used to deal with people with high skills. So we have kept these kind of the such workforce has been in the blue collar, low in the the vanilla jobs or the lower in the value chain of jobs. The gig workforce, especially in the white collar people who are having skilled people who have experience behind people who are retired people. I'm thinking it's going to open a door to a lot of retired people because maybe they have the maximum experience, and the maximum experience is maximum richness in terms of their delivery. If you deal with those people, they understand governance, compliance, protocols, advisories, or how do you deal with multiple clients? How do you ensure intellectual property of one company? How do you ensure confidentiality? They understand it much better anyway. So as I told you that such workforce, you named it differently, freelancers or consultants, or whatever name today, gig workforce, they have been oriented to work in this kind of culture for last 10 years. But they have been a lesser majority. HR and the businesses will have to be ready with different models of employment. It is not going to be one full-time, the other half-time. Maybe full-time, part-time, okay, beyond you have to think something. Maybe the person comes in the project only when he's required for that period. So maybe your workforce planning or your project planning will have to work in a manner, you have to design it in a manner that the workforce comes only when the job comes. You don't hire people and make them sit and wait for work. I truly feel that they will be more responsible, and they are responsible. They know how to work with the different companies already. The only thing is that you have to take the leap of faith of hiring them and convincing your lot of people, your lot within, that it works.
Probably the HR will have a bigger responsibility in terms of nurturing a culture which is open to change or acceptable of change. So say for example something like this or something new comes in, HR has the responsibility to develop a culture that its managers, its leaders, and everybody in the organization is acceptable to that change that is coming
Right.
in.
See, we were taught in our schools, business schools, that the HR is also a catalyst for change. HR, human resource function, is a catalyst for change, and they need to be, leaders, facilitating change. So it's been their time immemorial. Change. We have dealt with change most part of our life. Human resources, whether it's training, when you say it's a change of mindset or skill. When you bring in a new policy, it's a change of adoption. When we change rules or terms of employment, it's a change. When you counsel, it's a change. When you reprimand, it's a change. When when you terminate somebody, it's a change because it also has a spillover effect, right? When you rationalize, it's a change. When you do planning in a different manner using agile or whatever technique, it's change. So I guess we are oriented to that change. However, the challenge would be how do you transpire this change management skills within the entire team? typically what happens, HR heads will confine this change management skill, or will confine the change management roles to senior HR teams. I think that has to change, because what we feel that, okay, the person who's at the bottom transacting with the customer, or transacting the customer, internal customer, I mean, the employees, it doesn't need to change. He needs to just, implement, and he just needs to get the thing done, and he needs to push, and he needs to ensure that hona chahiye. He needs to ensure that everybody is following it. So unfortunately, it is also truth that, a lot of junior HR folks become, so-called invigilators, or so-called, people who are checking, and people who are policing maybe, or people who are, telling you to do. Now you ask employees and you ask line managers, they will say, oh, HR guys only dictate, they only talk, they only tell us to do, they never listen. They don't, allow us to opine, not in an extreme manner, but yeah, they, even in a sense of humor, they will tell you this. The reason being that we have not done much in terms of cascading the change management skill to the lower, hierarchies within HR. Now, it is ironical that the HR head and maybe the senior HR staff may not be able to meet all employees or leaders regularly. They will only come in where there's a conflict, or there's a policy deployment at a larger level, or there's a communication, or there's a change decision at the top level. And they will obviously work with maybe the board or the functional heads. What about employees? So the rubber hits the ground without being properly galvanized. So you need to have your junior HR staff develop sense of empathy. How do you really manage change? How do you address dissent? How do you really absorb truths which are lost in the quagmire of hierarchy? Or how do you, ensure no distortion to the bottom, or bottoms up? So bottoms up approach will only happen when you have sensitive ears on the ground. So I feel that, yes, first of all, HR obviously has to address that, and they have to they have to ensure that it's no more a domain of a OD person, organization developer, or the training in charge, or somebody sitting, as a business HR, partner HR. Everybody, the hiring person, the person who is actually entering data, everybody has to orient themselves to this sensitivity and change. Then only when you are actually transacting, when you're talking to the person in front, you'll be able to explain the purpose. Most of the time, the purpose is not explained with the same energy, same passion, same conviction, or same empathy. And if you're not communicating this with these attributes I mentioned, it will be taken as, somebody just forcing, compelling, bol raha hai, karna padega, and it would be always, left with half-hearted conviction or half-hearted execution. So change management, I think it is only going to be more important, more critical. It's only going to be more aggressively in demand.
Have we also come to realize that, like few of the organizations where I was having conversations with, um, have come to realize that many of the roles are redundant. They never needed them full time, but they still kept hiring them. So that's a very big learning for their hiring process. And many of the organization have also come to realize that, many of the roles need multi skills. While they might have one core skill requirement, but many other skills at the same time that might be required for one role, instead of hiring one skill per role. So do you see the same thing happening with your organization?
Very, very good point, because I see, we used to run programs, initiatives around multi-skilling. That term was used for a long time, multi-skilling. Everybody, goes for one additional skill. That was a prevalent thought for many years, in many companies, industry at large. So multi-skilling will help you, in job rotation, making yourself more, employable in different jobs. You're right. With the onset of digital way of doing things, and a platform which is going to be virtual online, lot of jobs will change. Lot of competencies will change. The nature of job will change. The definition of job will change. Uh, so, for example, if a BD guy earlier was maximum time of the BD guy would go in terms of visiting the client, waiting for the client, or pitching to the client, or being there. That very, a very fraction of that. If you take that job specific, now it will change now. When I see that BD teams are working online, BD teams are working, talking to clients online. They are actually pitching online. So some of the skills, yes, it has to change. How do you really present? How do you really present in a digital world? How do you really brand yourself in a digital world? How do you really convince people while being remote? Audits, for example. So audits were something which used to happen at the place of the customer. The auditors will come and just sit on your head. Now the auditor has to really struggle because he has to do it online, and all documents have to be in that shape, manner, whatever soft copies or PDFs or whatever, and you still have to do your job. So I think this ability to gauge, ability to detect, ability to trust, ability to empathize, ability to use analytics, ability to use numbers differently, ability to, find things out in a different world will change. So a lot of things actually you'll have to find ways. Okay, if I was doing like this, how do I change now? That when we're evaluating jobs, it is very interesting to see that jobs have changed. And my counterpart was telling, sir, this has changed, this dimension, now this is going. So we have clubbed. You're right. A lot of things is broadbanded. A lot of jobs are coming together. So ये तो मतलब given है कि post currently or scenarios going ahead will demand people to look at jobs differently, because that's again something which the business heads will take up very 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 happily. And yeah, if you have that, they will be very happy from the standpoint of that. Yes, it helps me in terms of my project costing, in terms of my cost management, in terms of profitability. So my gross margin will increase. Very happy. You will see that a lot of resources will require to have multiple skills, and they would have already developed certain skills. And when they say that, okay, you had less resource, but you tried out this guy, and there's a aha feeling, oh, this guy turned out to be good. So you will find such surprises in every team. Now that's the time when you can collapse some of the roles and broadband them. So that brings a very important, very important job of HR guys, or to design the job. So designing of jobs is going to be a big area. So HR guys have to recast the whole role.
Everything is going to be reshaped based on our requirements. Say for example, if we say jobs are going to change, the competencies required for those jobs are going to change, and the trainings required for those competencies are going to change. And the trainings required by different sets of people, whether we are talking about the permanent workforce or the contract workforce, or we're talking about fixed term employed,
true, very true,
or we are talking about the freelancers or the gig workforce. So everything has to be shaped based on our initial what jobs we require.
Yes, and everything is linked, interlinked. Your training, your everything. So you really cannot separate one activity from the other.
Correct.
Okay, your jobs will change, the evaluation methods will change, evaluation will change. Evaluation changes, your inputs will change in terms of making the resource much more better. Possibly, I would say that you will find a lot of in-house trainers emerging in a different scenario, in a new scenario, a new set of rules. You'll find a lot of people will use very high skilled resources for training people rather externalizing it.
Correct.
So I see less dependency on outside trainers, or you will use your gig workforce who come on the top in terms of value chain, or very senior people who have lived their lives and very senior positions, they will become your trainer. So I think the training itself will change. And you're right, some of these changes will be will happen on job. Some of it has to be brought in, some built in, and some you have to obviously on a continuous basis have to create. And while you do this transition, yeah, there will be a challenge that you'll have to maybe get rid of resources who are not able to change it up. That also is a truth. That happens all the time. It will happen. So organizations have to drive that point home that, look, employees will have to really see the development part, or the training, development, upskilling part as their own responsibility. Generalist will be in demand. People with critical thinking, people who are agile, people who are quick in terms of absorbing truth, people who are geared towards increasing their abilities. Foremost thing is that employees have to take the responsibility of self-development in their own hands, and they have to invest. The challenge is that how do you invest? Because the mindset is very different. Mindset is that I am depending on others for my training. That dependability will reduce going forward.
Now that jobs are going virtual, the operations are going more virtual, the kind of trainings that probably come into picture are managing workforce remotely, or how to collaborate remotely, or managing performance, or managing dialogues remotely. So virtual platform is a solution to that. But again, how to do that virtually in an effective manner is going to be a matter of learning, not training, I would say, but a matter of learning for many of our traditional mindset managers.
True. It's going to be difficult because any organization will have all generations of resources. You'll have the baby boomers, you'll have Gen X, Gen Y, now the millennials, all kind of people, and they all have to collaborate and all have to come together. They have been doing, and but then it will become more challenging because in a physical space, it's easy to meet, understand, empathize, and put your views forward. In a virtual platform, getting a baby boomer talk to a millennial or a millennial is definitely a different ballgame. Early June, July, there was a meeting, and I was telling my seniors and my colleagues and all my peers that, look, people are very excited. All of you think that work from home is the thing to go, and this is going to be the panacea, and this is going to be all remedy, and this is something which everybody will enjoy. I think otherwise. I think it'll also make people bored, beyond a point. It'll stereotype thinking. It will also create issues on health. It will also create issues on your mental, fatigue. You will find people with back issues, neck issues, eye issues. It's already happening. So when in the month of June, I was telling my folks, they were little eyes popped up, very surprised. They glared at me and they said, "What are you saying?" I don't think so. Everybody is so happy. Everybody is so happy. Nobody needs leaves. Everybody is at home, relaxed, and they can work at their ease. I said, look, the issue is that we're all in offices. We're moving. We used to go out, maybe, go for a fag down, the building, or you take a mug of coffee and, enjoy a conversation. You move around. Ghar pe wo nahi ho raha, because ghar pe you are constrained by limitations.
Many of the people have started saying that, while we were in office, at least we knew that we need to shut down our computers or laptop at 5 or 6. But when we're at home, we don't know when we are
9, 10, we don't know. Yeah. And Saturday, Sunday, okay, you can always. So, the managers have to be sensitive. There was a time, start time, end time. I think that has to be here also. The other thing was what I realized, and a lot of managers thought that people don't want, they would not need leaves. Why would they need leaves? They're at home only, right? So it was difficult to convince them, look, I want to switch off from work. The leave thing earlier, pre-COVID, was meant for rejuvenation, take a break, get, renewed in your mental field, and nothing changes there. the blended workforce, a blended operations, a blended way of offices, or blended way of using your resources will continue. Not everybody will be working from home, and not everybody would like to work from office. You have to strike a balance. Performance management coaching, again, uh, in physical, even if you are physically, in physical proximity also, you will see the relationship or the discussions or the dialogue between the manager and employee is always a very uncomfortable, area, right? That's the area where people avoid, and that's where the performance management processes always get a poor feedback or not so great feedback. There is a possibility that some of the managers or some of the operational managers will also develop a sense of mistrust because of this virtual employee, because of this virtual, remote management. Say, now I don't even know what's happening with the guy. So how do you really build the trust factor? So I think the focus will shift towards outcomes.
Correct.
And managers will require to track performance differently. So far, they were saying they would be more concerned in terms of office. Okay, the guy has come to office, fine. And the guy is leaving at time, fine. So he's very happy. What was he doing between coming to office and going in pre-COVID time was anyway partly known and partly unknown to the manager. That's a fact. But now in virtual world, when you're actually interacting with your team's colleagues, or the sense of skepticism or doubt can be little more. And then you'll feel, okay, I think this guy is, shutting his laptop, may not be available every time. Every time I call him, I, get to know that he's in a shop, or he's procuring something, he's gone out, or he's meeting. But boss, tell me, I mean, in a work from home, is at 10 hours, and you want the person to be 10 hours sitting in front of his laptop. So the whole approach towards managing performance, managing, deliveries, or managing projects will have to change. It has to be outcome based, and you give the freedom. It's good because that's how freelance workers work. That's how people. So in a sense, when you're dealing with your own employees, even if they're own employees in a work from home scenario, the trust factor has to be all the more important. It's a very, very, it's very, what do you say? It's very easy to develop that sense of, feeling, okay, I think something wrong. The guys are, having fun, or maybe he's, and all the more if the performance is dipping, or if the performance not up to mark. So if not up to mark, okay, work from home is not a concept, or remote management nahi kaam karta hai. So there will be always naysayers and cynics who will castigate the process, who will say that I don't trust that this will work.
As you said, that performance measures will change from time to the deliverables. And the communication style might have to change.
Yes.
Right? And the frequency might have to change, or the way the teams collaborate with each other. When we're physically present, it's a different approach, how we, collaborate for work, for a single assignment, 5 people working on a single assignment. While it might change when we're talking about working virtually or work from home.
Right. Certainly. And that's where that's where you see people complaining that my work hours have become longer.
Yeah.
Because typically what happens in an office environment, if you have to do a quick huddle or brainstorm something, you tend to either schedule a meeting or get people quickly for 5 minutes. Let's assemble, and you, by your position power or by your authority, or by people do galvanize. Okay, chalo, let's, boss is calling, or my teams, so let's do it, and you resort issues quickly. That doesn't happen in the virtual world. It doesn't happen that fast. So, for example, I've got 5 people to log in. I have to first check whether they're available. And remember, this is the only medium everybody's using. You'll always have a paucity of time at the other end. You might be available. He may not be available. Or she may not be available. She might be interacting with somebody. But it's very easy to jump to a conclusion. You know what? I called thrice and the person wasn't there. Or on Teams, I see him, away. So does away mean that he's really away from work, or he's only away from Teams? Or the, so these are subtle things which human beings are so vulnerable to. Human tendencies are built by self affirmations. So the more of negative or skeptic self-affirmations you give, you turn out to be almost like okay, I don't believe this guy. So yes, that is a watch. That is a very, very careful watch for HRs. So if the manager is coming back complaining, get the other side of the story. If the manager says, look, the guy did not turn up after going to his village or home, and the guy was on unauthorized leave, sack him. You cannot do that. And it's very pertinent for you to really find the other side of the story, because the other side of the story is lesser known today. Or, we have to deal with more unknown than earlier. So pre-COVID, post-COVID, one thing is certain, that we will learn, at least, hone our ability to handle ambiguity. Other problem besides change management is unknown, managing ambiguity, so how do you really get to know facts? I think the first thing what HR guys can do is placate the managers, or coach them that, look, don't start with the notion of mistrust, or don't start with the notion of skepticism, don't start with the notion of thinking bad or negative. Give a chance to maybe some other truth which you're not aware. That's important. And if you ask me, or if you ask counterparts or other HR guys, or other business leaders, they will say that they've realized one thing, that they started with a lot of skepticism, doubts, whether work will happen or not. In our scenario, we were almost very doubtful that, how can we have designed team working out of it? And many other such jobs where we had a lot of, negative, lot of apprehensions to say that whether it will happen. And we have realized that people have come back saying that they have worked better. But I would not generalize that. I would, take a cautious step of saying that I think work from home has worked very well for most companies and most of the jobs. There are jobs where we have had difficulty also. So, for example, a typical compliances work, or a typical, training work, or typical which requires, physical, meeting, or that has got trouble. A BD person's outreach or whatever, meeting clients, which is an integral part of connecting, building rapport, or network, has got hampered. So some jobs obviously will be hindered a bit.
Thank you so much for the time that you spared for this interview.
Thank you, Richa, for providing me an opportunity to speak. I know it's taken time for us, but then I had a pleasant experience having a conversation with you. It allowed me to really look back, think back, recollect, and it helped in terms of refreshing the entire experience. So really thankful from